Hello, BookTube. All right, this is our final read-along of Frank Herbert's Dune. This is installment number 1 in DuneTube, where me and a bunch of other great booktubers are reading one Frank Herbert Dune novel a month until December, starting with a book that is widely regarded as one of the greatest science fiction novels ever written. My co-hosts are doing one video a month. They have given me papal dispensation to do a normal read-along. So I broke Dune up into fragments, and we just read along all month long, and now we're finishing. And we reached a major turning point, a precipice, last time. The imperial houses of this future intergalactic empire run on the spice melange, which not only gives the secret society of the Bene Gesserit their greater enhanced perceptive abilities, and not only is intensely addictive to a lot of people in the Empire, but also gives the Spacing Guild their ability to fold space and move gigantic starships full of people and troops in between star systems where otherwise simple Einsteinian physics would make that impossible. They can fold space, and they can use the spice heightens prescience. It heightens your ability to see lines of future probability. And when you think about it, if you're moving a spaceship at massive trans-relativistic speed, you need that in order to know whether or not you're going to park it in a sun when you come into normal space. The Guild has mastered that, and it makes them sort of unspoken masters of this Imperium. But the master of this Imperium is the Emperor, Shaddam IV. And behind the scenes, unbeknownst to most of the people, most of the noble houses in the Imperium, he has made a deal with the House Harkonnen, headed by a grotesquely fat Baron Harkonnen. He's made a deal with them to change holdings. The Harkonnens run the planet of Arrakis, known as Dune, which is the only place where spice can be found. And the Emperor wants to move House Harkonnen out and move House Atreides in. The Duke is a relative of the Imperial family on the Distaff side, and is extremely well liked, not only in the Landsraad, which is the ruling governing body, but also among the great houses. And the Duke Leto Atreides, and his family, his concubine, Jessica, who is a member of the Bene Gesserit, his son Paul, and the members of their household. There's a warrior troubadour named Gurney Halleck. There's a sword master named Duncan Idaho. There's a Mentat assassin known as Thufir Hawat, Mentats being the human embodiment of a supercomputer. The Duke Leto Atreides knows perfectly well that the Harkonnens are planning a trap. They are planning to destroy him and his family. But he still plans to make the most of moving to Dune. And he has a plan in mind. Not just a question of changing the populace attitude toward the ruling houses. The Harkonnens, of course, were brutes. They were beasts and slave masters. The Duke wants the people of the towns and the cities of Arrakis to know that there are other ways for noble houses to rule. The Atreides are a noble family. They are enlightened, and they have a remarkable ability to sway loyalty. The Duke is counting not only on that, but on one other thing as well, which we only get in bits and pieces in the early parts of this book that we've been reading. And that is that, in addition to the people who live in the villages, there is also a wild folk on Dune called the Fremen, who live out in the great deserts that form 99.9% of the planet, and that somehow manage to live there and thrive there despite the presence of enormous sandworms that patrol the sands and consume anything that crosses their path. The Fremen are a wild folk, a warrior folk, a barbaric folk. Most of the people in the towns of Arrakis don't particularly trust or like them. And the Imperium doesn't have any idea what they are or what to make of them. The Harkonnens hunted them for sport and consider them to be little more than an annoyance. But the Duke Leto, realizes that Dune is such a harsh place, such an unforgiving place, such a hellhole, that it might be possible to shape people who have adapted to live in such conditions into an incredible fighting force. A fighting force equal to or superior to the fighting force called the Sardaukar, who are the military arm of the Emperor himself. The Sardaukar come from a planet called Seleucia Secundus, which is the Emperor's prison planet, a place of legendary barbarity. And there are all sorts of myths and rumors around the Sardaukar. But in the chapters that we've seen, that we've read so far, when the Sardaukar, the Emperor, of course, lends the Baron under concealment, under false flags, a couple of legions of Sardaukar in order to help him betray and extirpate House Atreides. And in the course of the chapters where that happens, the defeat is almost complete. Duncan Idaho appears to die. Thufir Howard is taken into the service of the Baron. Mentats being sort of human machines, the Baron just reasons, well, it doesn't matter how long you've served House Atreides. House Atreides is no more, and I need a Mentat, so you will serve me now. And I'll no more expect you to betray me than I would if I took a toaster from my enemy. Also, Gurney Halleck lives. He has been living with smugglers and vowing revenge somehow against all odds. But most importantly, the Lady Jessica and Paul survive. Only by a whisker. Their craft goes down in the open desert. They manage to survive by a hair's breadth, being eaten by sandworms, and they make their way to the Fremen and prove their worth to the Fremen in combat. Prove their worth to stay alive, for the Fremen to house them and teach them the ways of the deep desert. And the Fremen have a kind of wild-grown Bene Gesserit of their own. They have a kind of... The Bene Gesserit, the most adept of them are Reverend Mothers. We met one of them in the very earliest chapters of this book. And the Fremen have a kind of wild-grown Reverend Mother. And she's old. And it's time for her to go and pass on her memories and her Reverend Mother superpowers, if you will, to someone else. And that someone else is Jessica, who becomes a Reverend Mother and takes spice essence into her body, which activates all kinds of ancestral cellular memories and brings her to a heightened state of awareness that characterizes Reverend Mothers. And she's not supposed to do it. All of the conventions and the disciplines of the Bene Gesserit are against it because Jessica is pregnant. Her daughter she's carrying a daughter of the old Duke, of the dead Duke Leto. And she knows that if she undergoes what is called in the book the spice agony, her child will too, within her. The Bene Gesserit have long viewed a child who is awakened to all those thousands of years of ancestral cellular memories when still in the womb or still a child as an abomination, a monster to be killed immediately, because all of that wisdom comes without any of the tempering of adult life. Jessica knows that risk, but she takes it anyway. But the far more important thing that happens to Jessica and Paul among the Fremen is that Paul undergoes the spice agony. And it changes him very much. It makes him aware that he is, in fact, the thing that the Bene Gesserit have been hoping for and guiding genealogical lines of breeding for centuries. And that is the thing they call the Kwisatz Haderach, which is a man who has the same cellular cultural memories and heightened senses and body abilities that every Reverend Mother does, or that all Reverend Mothers do, all put together. Paul becomes that. And it only enhances the religious hold of awe that he already exercises over the Fremen. That hold grows enormously in the bits of time that pass in this book up to the chapters that we're reading today. Herbert makes a very wise decision to give us, to catapult time forward by a few years, and then plunk us back down in a slightly changed world. Paul and Jessica are established parts of the Fremen world, but far more importantly, Paul has become a messiah. He's become a religious figure. His village name among the Fremen, Muad'Dib, has suddenly become a wildfire phenomenon all throughout Dune, all over the far-flung desert villages of the Fremen, all now pledge their allegiance to Muad'Dib. And the name has reached the ears not only of the Harkonnen, who are now ruling on Dune, but also the Emperor. No one as yet, at the moment, realizes that Muad'Dib is Paul Atreides, the rightful heir of Duke Leto Atreides, and the rightful heir to the House Atreides, and a person who has every right to exact revenge on both House Harkonnen and the Emperor. No one as yet realizes that. It's in the chapters that we're reading today. We're slaloming to the end in our read-along today. It's in these chapters that all of that comes together, that everyone realizes. The Emperor tells Baron Harkonnen that Muad'Dib is actually Paul Atreides. And the way that we find this out is because the Emperor comes to visit. He comes to visit Dune. To visit Baron Harkonnen. And it's only in those final revelation scenes that we realize how much and how little everybody has known. We've been guessing quite a bit up until then. Until we reach the climax. But before we get to the climax, we realize in several different chapters that the key here is going to be the Fremen as a fighting force. It's going to be Seleucus Secundus. It's going to be the Sardaukar. That very, very simple matter of armed legions is going to be one of the main linchpins of this giant space opera about worms and spice and spaceships. And there's a wonderful scene, one of my favorite scenes in the novel Dune, where this becomes clear. Because it's a scene between Thufir Hawat, the old Mentat, and Baron Harkonnen. I want to read you just a bit of it, because I just love this scene. I've sat across from many rulers of great houses, but never a more gross or dangerous pig than this one, Thufir Hawat told himself. You may speak plainly with me, Hawat, the Baron rumbled. He leaned back in his suspensor chair, the eyes in their folds of fat boring into Hawat. The old Mentat looked down at the table between him and the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, noting the opulence of its grain. Even this was a factor to consider in assessing the Baron, as were the red walls of this private conference room and the faint, sweet herb scent that hung in the air, masking a deeper musk. You didn't have me send that warning to Raban, that's the Baron's nephew, who is currently crushing the citizens of Dune in order to make their spice quota. You didn't have me send that message to Raban as an idle whim, said the Baron. Hawat's leathery old face remained impassive, betraying none of the loathing he felt. I suspect many things, my lord, he said. Yes, well, I wish to know how Arrakis figures in your suspicions about Seleucus Secundus. It is not enough that you say to me the Emperor is in a ferment about some association between Arrakis and his mysterious prison planet. Now, I rushed the warning out to Raban only because the courier had to leave on that spaceship. You said there could be no delay. Well and good. Now I will have an explanation. He babbles too much, Hawat thought. He's not like Leto, who could tell me a thing with a lift of an eyebrow or the wave of a hand, nor like the old Duke, who could express an entire sentence in the way he accented a single word. This is a clod. Destroying him will be a service to mankind. You will not leave here until I have had a full and complete explanation, the Baron said. You speak too casually of Seleucus Secundus, Hawat said. It's a penal colony, the Baron said. The worst riffraff in the galaxy are sent to Seleucus Secundus. What else does one need to know? That conditions on the prison planet are more oppressive than anywhere else, Hawat said. You hear that the mortality rate among new prisoners is higher than 60%. You hear that the Emperor practices every form of oppression there. You hear all this and do not ask questions? The Emperor doesn't permit great houses to inspect his prison, the Baron growled, but he hasn't seen into my dungeons either. And curiosity about Seleucus Secundus is, Hawat put a bony finger to his lips, discouraged. So he's not proud of some of the things he must do there. Hawat allowed the faintest of smiles to touch his dark lips. His eyes glinted in the glow tube light as he stared at the Baron. And you've never wondered where the Emperor gets his Sardaukar? The Baron pursed his fat lips. This gave his features a look of a pouting baby, and his voice carried a tone of petulance as he said, Why, he recruits. That is to say, there are levies, and he enlists from... Pah! Hawat snapped. The stories you hear about the exploits of the Sardaukar, they're not rumors, are they? Those are the first-hand accounts from a limited number of survivors who have fought against the Sardaukar. The Sardaukar are excellent fighting men, no doubt about it, the Baron said, but I think my own legion's a pack of holiday excursionists by comparison, Hawat snarled. You think I don't know why the Emperor turned against House Atreides? This is not a realm open to your speculation, the Baron said. Is it possible that even he doesn't know what motivated the Emperor in this? Hawat thought to himself. Any area is open to the speculation if one does what you're hired me to do, Hawat said. I am a Mentat. You do not withhold information or computational lines from a Mentat. For a long minute, the Baron stared at him. Then, say what you must say, then, Mentat. The Padishah Emperor turned against House Atreides because the Duke's war masters, Gurney Halleck and Duncan Idaho, had trained a fighting force, a small fighting force, to within a hair as good as the Sardaukar. Some of them were even better, and the Duke was in a position to enlarge in force, to make it every bit as strong as the Emperor's. The Baron weighed this disclosure, and then said, "What has Arrakis to do with this?" "It provides a pool of recruits already conditioned to the bitter survival training." The Baron shook his head. "You cannot mean the Fremen." "I mean the Fremen." "Pah! Well, then why warn Raban? There cannot be more than a handful of Fremen left after the Sardaukar pogrom and Raban's own oppression." Hawat continued to stare at him silently. "Not more than a handful," the Baron repeated. "Raban himself killed 6,000 last year alone." Still Hawat stared at him. "And the year before that it was 9,000, the Baron said, "and before they left, the Sardaukar must have accounted for at least 20,000. "What are Raban's troop losses for the past 2 years?" Hawat asked. The Baron rubbed his jowls. "Well, he's been recruiting rather heavily, to be sure. His agents make rather extravagant promises, and shall we say 30,000 in round numbers?" Hawat asked. "That would seem a little high," the Baron said. "Quite the contrary," Hawat said. "I can read between the lines of Baron's reports as well as you can, and you certainly must have understood my reports from our agents." "Arrakis is a fierce planet," the Baron said. "Storm losses can—" "We both know the figure for storm accretion," Hawat said. "What if he has lost 30,000? The Baron demanded, and blood darkened his face. "By your own count," Hawat said, "he killed 15,000 over 2 years while losing twice that number. You say the Sardaukar accounted for another 20,000, possibly a few more, and I've seen the transportation manifests for their return from Arrakis. If they killed 20,000, they lost almost 5 for 1. Why won't you face these figures, Baron, and understand what they mean?" The Baron spoke in coldly measured cadence. "This is your job, Mentat. What do you mean?" "I gave you Duncan Idaho's head count on the villages he visited," Hawat said. "It all fits. If they had just 250 such village communities, their population would be about 5 million. My best estimate is that they had at least twice that many communities. You scatter your population on such a planet." 10 million? The Baron's jowls quivered with amazement. "At least." The Baron pursed his fat lips. The beady eyes stared without wavering at Hawat. "Is this true Mentat computation?" he wondered. "How could this be and no one suspect?" "We haven't even cut heavily into their birth rate growth figure," Hawat said. "We've just weeded out some of their less successful specimens, leaving the strong to grow stronger, just like on Seleucia Secundus." "Seleucia Secundus," the Baron barked. "What has this to do with the Emperor's prison planet?" "A man who survives Seleucia Secundus starts out being tougher than most others. When you add the very best military training—" "Nonsense. By our argument, I could recruit from among the Fremen after the way they've been oppressed by my nephew." Hawat spoke in a mild voice. "Don't you oppress any of your troops?" "Well, oppression is a relative thing," Hawat said. "Your fighting men are much better off than those around them. They see the unpleasant alternative to being soldiers of the Baron." The Baron fell silent, eyes unfocused. The possibilities. Had Raban unwillingly given House Harkonnen its ultimate weapon? You see, in a scene like that, not only that Hawat has to lead the Baron by the nose to understand what he himself is sitting on, but also we get a thrill, a shiver in a chapter like that, because neither the Baron nor Thufir Hawat understands in this chapter that someone is already taking advantage of that exact line of computation. Paul Atreides has all the abilities of a Mentat. In fact, he has all the abilities of generations of Mentats and generations of Reverend Mothers. And he knows exactly what he's doing, becoming a fanatical religious leader of a desert people who number in the millions. And that is the linchpin on which this book's rousing climax turns, is that Paul has legions of Fremen at his back, and they can easily defeat Sardaukar in pitched battle. They also ride sandworms, and on top of that, in the set piece that is the climax of the action of this story, you may remember in the beginning of this book, the Atreides are brought low because, in addition to betrayal by their house physician, Dr. Ewa, the Emperor and the Harkonnens use atomics. They use artillery to blast through the Atreides defenses in the city of Arrakeen and other places. They use outdated weapons, in other words, artillery, because they can't use atomics. There is a convention among the great houses that no one may use atomics against another man. You cannot use atomics against people. And Paul comes up with an innovation on that. You can't use them against people, but you can use them against inanimate objects. And the city of Arrakeen, where the Emperor comes to visit, when he comes to visit Baron Harkonnen, is shielded from the Great Desert by a shield wall of natural rock. And Paul waits and times things perfectly until the great-great-grandmother of a sandstorm is approaching the shield wall. Ordinarily, Arrakeen would be safe enough. There'd be a small amount of bleed-through, but nothing major. Paul decides to use atomics to blast a hole open in the shield wall, allowing the storm to let loose on the plain where the Emperor's spaceships are parked, destroying them, and under cover of that storm, Paul's legions of Fremens also attack the Emperor's legions of Sardaukar and wipe them out. It's a coup, and it's handled with surgical neatness, and it leads to a few confrontational scenes. Paul confronts the Emperor. Lady Jessica confronts the Reverend Mother who we meet at the very beginning of Dune, who has nothing but contempt for the decisions that she's made. Not only, I mean, yes, she produced the Kwisatz Haderach, but she also produced the Abomination. She produced Alia, Paul's sister, who is only a child but has the awareness of 10,000 Reverend Mothers. And you might think, in a lesser novelist's hands, that scene, that great set piece, where that visual of the legions of Fremen riding on a massive storm on sandworms to attack the Emperor's forces and beat them, that would be the rousing climax. But I've always admired the artistry of what Frank Herbert does at the conclusion of this book. This is a very intensely human tale. Yes, it is a space opera. Yes, it deals in huge themes and features. There are intergalactic politics involved. And some of those bigger themes become much more prominent as Frank Herbert's Dune novels go on. And to my delight, I love the way he writes about meta stuff like that. But what he very wisely chooses to end the novel Dune in as intensely personal a way as possible. Not, I mean, the heir of a duke that the Emperor dispossessed, beating the Emperor on the battlefield and claiming the throne and the Emperor's own daughter. That's human enough, but Herbert goes one step even further. He gives us the ultimate human ending, where the action ends with a knife fight between two young men. A knife fight between Paul Atreides and the Baron Harkonnen's heir, now the new Baron, since the Baron at the time that this happens is dead, Feyd-Rautha, who is a kind of almost Paul Atreides. You can easily see him as a dark mirror version of Paul Atreides. And the book ends with them fighting, and the fight scene is riveting, absolutely riveting. And that is largely thereabouts where Dune ends. Paul is the master of the planet Dune, and he has warned the Spacing Guild, if you cross me in any way, I'll destroy the spice. And they tell him, well, you'll be blind too. And he says, it doesn't matter to me. A person who has the ability to destroy something has the ultimate control over it. You will do what I say instantly without any hesitation, or I will destroy the thing that gives your whole world meaning. And they listen, and they obey. And the Emperor has no choice but to obey. He is a hostage. His soldiers have been beaten. Paul will marry his daughter and become Emperor in turn. And just like that, in a coup de main like that, all the politics of this imperial world that we have been fed in bits and pieces and installments throughout this book comes to its fruition. And the boy who we've seen be first a precocious heir to a noble house, and then a wanderer in the desert, and then a religious fanatic, is now on the path to being emperor, with a fanatical and unstoppable legion of warriors behind him who consider him to be God. And reading it again for this read-along, I was struck all over again by how brilliant this book is. This thing that I'm waving up is the new... Ace Paperbacks came out with these gorgeous new paperbacks of the whole of Frank Herbert's Dune books. I'm going to be using them all throughout. Totally unplanned. Totally unplanned. After railing for 3 years against sponsorships on BookTube, I was hardly going to do that. It was just a totally unplanned coincidence that they gave me these things right at the same time that other booktubers and I decided to do DuneTube. But that is where we end. The novel Dune ends with some long appendices, and they make interesting reading, just like the long appendices of the Lord of the Rings do. But the action proper stops with the end of that knife fight and with Paul victorious. And I was struck all over again reading this, how much this book deserves the endless accolades that it has gotten. Ordinarily, when something is praised to the skies like this from the very first minute, you come to it, half a century later, and you start to spot flaws and problems and whatnot. And the number of flaws or problems that I spotted in this book, in this read-along, it's minuscule. And the flaws themselves are infinitesimally small. They're not even worth mentioning. This is just a brilliant work. Just brilliant. And I've been very gratified to see in comments on these videos and also in emails to me, because keep in mind, you can email me about this or anything else, st.donahue@gmail. Email me about anything you want at any time. I love hearing from you all. But I've been very gratified to see that a lot of people, including a lot of young people, have said variations of the same thing, which is, I've known about this book, I've heard about it, maybe it's been on my shelf for a long time, but I've never pulled it down and read it, and boy am I glad I did. It's so not what I thought. It's so exciting and intelligent and involving. I'm very happy to hear that. And we're going to continue on. DuneTube, of course, is going to continue, but our read-along is also going to continue. We're finishing Dune for now. Feel free to read the appendices. They're a lot of fun. We're going to move on next time to the next book in the series, which is Dune Messiah, and which has often elicited the exact opposite response, even from Frank Herbert fans. So we're going to see what we make of that. Dune Messiah is widely regarded as the weakest of the Dune books. I'm looking forward to a chance to reread it in detail with the rest of you. So I don't have Dune Messiah with me now, but next weekend we're going to read the first quarter of Dune Messiah. So whatever it is, whatever the page length is, it's the thinnest Dune book of them all. So we'll go through it slowly, and that's good because it's a slower paced book. So I think going through it in 4 parts will really help. So when you find your copy of Dune Messiah, I have like 3 copies of it here. It's ridiculous. When you find your copy of Dune Messiah, just take the page count, split it into quarters, and we'll do the first quarter for next weekend. We're just going to keep going with Dune, and then in the 3rd weekend of next month, DuneTube will continue. My co-hosts will do their videos on Dune Messiah, and I'm looking forward to it. I really am. This is it's always a joy to reread these books, but to reread it in company, that's extra fun. so that is. I will make another video about all of our August plans. We are doing the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant on this channel. I'll be reading through. Me and a bunch of other booktubers are reading the first 6 Chronicles of Thomas Covenant. So we'll be reading the Ill-Earth War in August. We're reading Dune Messiah in August. And David Murphy and I are also doing Hitch-Along in the month of August. We're taking Christopher Hitchens' book, God is Not Great, and reading it a chapter every weekday. We're taking the weekends off, but in the month of August, at least for the bulk of the month of August, we're going to read a chapter from that book every day. And I imagine there are other read-alongs too that we have. Like for instance, we haven't even talked about doing a shared, just an ordinary read-along on this channel. Hitch-along I'm sharing with another booktuber. Thomas Covenant I'm sharing with other booktubers. DuneTube I'm sharing with other booktubers. Maybe we want to do an isolated read-along on this channel, just with us. I don't know. We haven't even discussed that yet. We'll be out of Trollope. We'll be out of Palliser novels, so we might pick something else. But anyway, that is the end of Dune for DuneTube, and I'm dying to hear what you all made of this. This is a major thing, that in a way that can't be said about. The number of science fiction fantasy books that reach this level of esteem, you can practically count them on the fingers of one hand. So this is a major thing. I can't wait to hear what you all made of it. But I'm going to wrap this up for now, and I think I have more videos today. If I do, you'll be seeing this face again. I know Frida hasn't been in any of these videos. She has been wandering around, but she's not mine to tell one way or another what to do when she's in her own home. So if she's not up here, it's probably because her ledge is too warm. But maybe next video she'll be here. You never know. I know that's the real reason you watch. I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.